Hi, everyone. Welcome to Make Business Better. I'm Zach Seward, the CEO and co-founder of Quartz. This is our new weekly show right here on LinkedIn every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm talking with business leaders who are committed to making business better through their own work and who are willing to come on and share practical advice for all of us to apply in our own lives and jobs. Today's episode is about making climate action critical and central to your company's culture. In the next 15 minutes, we'll go over the Quartz essentials on the state of climate economy. It's insights from our guest today, who is Jim Andrew, the Global Chief Sustainability Officer at PepsiCo. And hopefully brings back some advice that you all can use or holding your own companies accountable for their climate commitments. We'll also take viewer questions. You can put them right there in the comments. Thanks everybody for joining us. And we should start, of course, with our Quartz Essential. There's a new initiative, an NGO called the Science-Based Targets Initiative that is helping hold companies accountable for their sustainability commitments, to go public with the details of what, in fact, each company is committing to. And PepsiCo is part of that initiative, and I'll ask Jim about that in a little bit. As you can see, they're hardly alone. Food and beverage companies are the most commonly represented among companies joining this initiative. And as Quartz's Tim McDonald reported last month, companies with the largest carbon footprints, electric utilities, airlines, oil and gas companies, are still really poorly represented from this list. Nevertheless, the momentum among food companies is notable given the challenges that industry faces, like single-use plastics, inefficient agricultural practices. And thankfully, we've got the right person to talk about all of that today, our guest, Jim Andrew, who will join us now. He's the Global Chief Sustainability Officer at PepsiCo, a company that probably needs no introduction, but I should mention has at least 23 brands currently generating more than $1 billion each in estimated retail sales annually. Jim also heads up PepsiCo's Beyond the Bottle business unit and leads global sustainability across the whole company. Welcome, Jim.
Great. Thanks, Zach. Great to be here.
We're all working from home and these days, obviously. And so before we get into the questions, I'd like to ask our guests just to introduce a little bit of their home background. I won't make you tell us about your digital background behind you, which I like very much, but presuming you're sitting at a desk or somewhere like that, any objects in front of you could introduce us to?
Yeah. Well, thanks. I'm glad you like the background. It's new, and I figured get something bright in the morning. Like many people, I'm sitting at a table that's become a desk. If I look around, well, one of the things is my water bottle. It's a SodaStream professional water bottle, and really, it's how we're taking the brand SodaStream into a broader environment. No pun intended. So workplace, away from home, colleges and universities, and this is the bottle, and this is a QR code that actually enables a touchless, contactless machine to be able to dispense water forward beverages without ever touching the machine. It taps into an app and it allows you to track your hydration goals. So this is an early version. I've got one. I use it, and I'm going to take a sip of it right now, Zach. But thanks.
Sounds good. Yeah. So the idea is to get those in college cafeterias, things like that.
Yep, and also in offices. We've seen great demand as companies are going back to work, and we had started this late last year, before 2019, before the pandemic. A lot of interest in the part of companies, because what their employees are interested in, healthier, more sustainable options. And so we developed SodaStream Professional, and this is a machine and over time there'll be a whole family of machines that allow companies to meet the needs of those employees. Beverages, better for you, healthy, free from single-use packaging.
Probably the most beloved machine in the Quartz New York office when we were using it was the Bevy, which I gather is a competitor to SodaStream, but very similar on-demand carbonated drinks. That was by far the best perk in that office.
Well, we'll get you upgraded into a SodaStream Professional. Happy to take you through all the advantages. But yeah.
Sounds good. Well, I also wanted to talk about your title, Chief Sustainability Officer. And it's a growing title. Last year, we saw companies like Delta, Boeing, GM, among others, add CSOs to their ranks. When I think about what it must mean to be Chief Sustainability Officer, it's quite a broad remit. Certainly at a company like PepsiCo, there's very little that doesn't have some impact on the environment and implicate the company's sustainability. I think it's a real challenge with analogous titles that come to mind are like Chief Transformation Officer. Well, what isn't in need of transformation in a company? How do you make progress with a title like that with such a broad remit and such a huge company like PepsiCo?
Well, you're right on both counts. It's a very broad title and it's a huge company. And that's one of the things, I've probably got the best job in the company, to be honest, Zach, because it's really how do we take our broad footprint, our scale, and use it for good. PepsiCo, as you said, 23 brands, over $1 billion, 260,000 employees, associates around the world. We're in basically every country and territory you can think of, over 200. And we're active across the entire value chain. So we have a huge agricultural footprint, which many people don't know. We're about 52% of our company is foods, and even more than that touches agriculture. So all the way from that to packaging, as you said, to all of our production facilities. We have a very large fleet. We have the largest private vehicle fleet in the United States, I believe. So it's really how do we go? So I got to play across all that and working with our sector CEOs, our business leaders, to really how do we help move the ball forward across a very broad agenda. We made a big climate announcement last week, which you will have seen. We're very active in packaging and water. And so we made a couple of weeks ago, we had announced it in the US. We achieved 100% renewable electricity, and we committed to globally going to renewable electricity. So I get the opportunity to partner with our business leaders and partner with a whole set of companies and organizations outside of our four walls to be able to move forward, because that's really what we want to do, is use our scale for good to be able to make a real and lasting impact across this very broad agenda. And that's what makes the job so exciting.
What would you say, is there like a size at which a company should consider adding a chief sustainability officer? Like, at what point is it become necessary to carve out as its own corner of a C-suite?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've been struck. I came into this job late last year, September, and I've been struck by the number of people that have reached out to me, big companies, small companies, people I knew good friends who are active and are chief sustainability officers in one way or another. And as PepsiCo, we're excited to see any and all companies kind of headed down this journey. And I think because it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take a lot of partnership and collaboration, everybody team. So I don't think it's too early for any company, no matter how big or small, to have the role, if you will, of somebody who wakes up every day. I mean, I wake up every day and I'm worried about sustainability. How do we become more sustainable across all of our activities, all of our operations? I don't think any company is too big or too small to have that mindset and that role. So, I would encourage everybody to make sure that somebody has that responsibility and that accountability, and also that authority, that ability. Really important.
Makes sense. I mean, you just mentioned you wake up every day thinking about sustainability across the company. Sure, I'd like to think you have many partners in that regard, but no doubt there are other departments, or top goal is something else. So I'm curious how you approach inculcating throughout the company the kind of mindset that would allow it to be even plausible to hit some of the new goals you've reached. I have to imagine there's support for the ideals you're trying to achieve, and for getting to net zero emissions by 2040, which is the big announcement last week by PepsiCo. But that's a far cry from getting it done day to day, and presumably making your colleagues' jobs harder in the process.
I'm very fortunate in that I work with a CEO who's my boss, but an entire executive committee, my peers on the executive committee who really care about sustainability and about making sure that we leave as small of a footprint on the planet as humanly possible, and doing the right things. And so, it's something that I'm blessed with that. But at the same time, you're right. There's tension when you get to a day-to-day level, and so one of the ways that we hold ourselves accountable for, and I should also say, we have a board that's very supportive and very active and very engaged. When you get that kind of leadership across the whole company and across the whole globe, it's essential. It really helps, but I would say it's also needed. The way we hold ourselves accountable is we set these kind of goals, because we make these goals, we make them public, and then we're very transparent about how we report on them. Because that's how we hold ourselves accountable. But importantly, I think, Zach, it's also, I call it kind of the 3 E's. If you want to be successful, you got to excite, you got to educate, you got to engage. So you put a goal like this out, and it excites our entire organization and a lot of our partners. We've had I was just on the phone this morning with one of our sector CEOs, and he said, a lot of the scope 3 folks were actually very excited to see the leadership that we were taking and the ambition. So you really got to excite. Then you also have to educate. We're bringing in new terms. What is regenerative agriculture? What are scope 3 emissions? So you got to educate, and that's, for us, that's 260,000 employees plus a whole host of others outside of our 4 walls. And then ultimately, you got to engage it. You got to make it real for them. So we just and this was, again, let me stitch 2 points together. We just put in a plan to eliminate the impact of all carbon emissions from all of our employee air travel. So that's a big deal. That will touch a huge number of employees in the company of associates who, they will understand that their actions have an impact, and they will have a way that we will actually eliminate the net impact. At the same time, with the executive committee, it was a unanimous support for that. It's going to cost money. It's going to, at some level, make life a little more difficult for people, et cetera. But it was unanimous support. So you're right. You got to have that leadership, but then also, how do you excite, how do you educate, and how do you engage the employees and the whole base of folks inside and outside your 4 walls? I think that's how you do it. And then you make those goals, and you be very transparent. We have third parties. You mentioned the SBTI. We work with them. We work with the whole host to make sure that people know what we're doing, and we hold ourselves accountable for it.
So you're saying the public accountability of the goals also helps internally, because it's clear this is what the company is committed to achieving, and if we don't, it's going to be be an issue.
PepsiCo's a company that we like to do what we say we're going to do. We put a bunch of stretch into it, and you ask any business leader, and they'll feel like when they get their annual targets, they're getting stretched. But we like stretch it. But then we like to go do what we say we're going to do, and we like to accomplish it. And so, you're absolutely right. We put these goals out there. We set them high. We set them bold. We're not always exactly sure how we're going to accomplish them right now, but we're going to go figure it out, and then we're going to go do it. And so it's very motivating to the organization when we say something like, we're going to double our net climate goal, our climate goal by 2030, right? We're going to double down on that goal. We're going to be net zero by 2040. People get excited about that. But again, at the same time, we say something, we're going to hold ourselves accountable for it. We're going to report. We report annually, basically everything we do in our annual sustainability report. At any point in time, you can go on our website, you see our ESG. It's called ESG A to Z. It's kind of like everything you ever wanted to know. And it's all there. And we report annually. And then if we can along the way, we report, real time. So that is all part of the package of making sure that we're going to drive the whole organization forward and motivate them and engage them in accomplishing what, to the leadership is an incredibly important set of things.
You've made reference a few times to what I think is a subtle but really important part of the corporate sustainability commitments, which is how far out into the company's impact are you willing to go? The terms get thrown around in a stage 1, 2, 3, but in essence, are you only talking about the impact of the plastic bottles that my Pepsi is delivered in, or is it also going to include employee travel, the emissions by vendors, third parties you're working with? I imagine we'd need a whole day for you to fully answer that question. I'm more interested in how do you think about how much of PepsiCo's environmental impact you ought to be as a company responsible for reducing, and how far, in fact, are you going when you making this most recent commitment to go net zero?
Yeah, we're going on the leading edge. So really simply put, scope 1 are your own 4 walls. Scope 2 is the electricity and the energy that gets generated, and scope 3 is everything else you touch. And we went to scope 3, and that's for us about 91% of our total emissions footprint is in scope 3. So we could easily say, oh, we're going to do a lot in scope 1, and we are. I mean, we said we're going to have 75% reduction in our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2030. 75% reduction. Scope 3, we're going to be 40% net. That puts us over 40%, doubling our previous goal. And by the time we get to 2040, we're going to be net zero across all of that. So that's our partners, our co-packers, it's our third-party logistics providers, it's our bottlers. We have a huge, very important bottler partnership network. It's all that, because if we don't touch all that, companies aren't really doing, in our mind, what we think they need to do. And the SBTI, Science-Based Target Initiative, requires you to go to scope 3. And the goal that we've put out that they have validated is the most ambitious goal called for that they recognize and called for by the Paris Climate Accords. But to us, you got to go to scope 3. You got to go to scope 3. You got to include everything you touch, one way or the other.
I totally agree, and it's admirable you've done that, and do see other companies that shall not be named that are hiding behind much lesser commitments that are far easier to make, and I think that nuance gets lost in the conversation around corporate sustainability. I wanted to hone in on one part of the plan for PepsiCo. I was reading up on it. I know there are 2 core initiatives, one being mitigation to reduce emissions as they currently stand across the company. But the other half of that is something you're calling resilience. I'd love to hear more about what that's about and why it's as crucial a part of the sustainability plan for the company.
Yeah, well, mitigation, as you said, mitigation's part 1, and it's about we're going to do everything we can to reduce or eliminate our emissions. Resilience is how once you've gone on, you're doing all these steps around decarbonization. Resilience is about how do you make your company stronger? How do you make your employees stronger and more capable of dealing with change? Because assessing risk is a critical part of the thinking in any company, in any management team. We need to follow the science, and so we have done and continue to do climate risk assessments across our entire value chain. How is the changing climate science going to affect everything we do? And then we use that as part of our, business continuity planning. And that could be, what's it going to do on yields, in different parts of the world? What is it going to mean in terms of catastrophic weather and the increased likelihood of catastrophic weather or flooding or whatever the case may be? And so all of those things, making sure that our employees, first and foremost, are safe and are prepared. And then secondly, our facilities, our businesses are positioned to address what's coming. And so it's a part and parcel of how do we really incorporate climate and climate science into our thinking around risk in business.
I would imagine
what resilience is. And then what do we do to build that?
I would imagine a company like yours that's so agriculture dependent has quite enormous risk for climate change over the next several decades. What on that front, and the last question, what are you doing when it comes to agriculture, working with third parties, farmers to improve the efficiency of the food supply chain as part of this emission reduction initiative?
Yeah, critical part of it. Critical part. About a third of our total is in the agricultural. But so we're working with farmers. We have, for example, we have about 240 demonstration farms around the world, and more all the time, which are really where we work with partners, with like-minded companies, but also boots on the ground, if you will, hand in glove with farmers to really take best practices and to be able to share those and propagate those, because a big element is trust. And how do you get farmers to adopt new practices when they may have been doing things for the same way for generations? It's seen other farmers do them and put those practices into work. So we have a network of demonstration farms. We work with a very broad network of trusted partners. We touch about 40,000 farmers around, really helping them to build additional capability. The other thing about really putting regenerative practices into place is it's one of the relatively few places where you can actually take carbon out of the air and of the environment. And so we're really committed to scaling up regenerative practices with our total agricultural footprint as a way to have a positive impact on the overall emissions. And those sometimes they help our crops. A lot of times they help other crops that the farmers grow and don't have any direct benefit to us. What we're really interested in is what's the right thing to do for the planet? How can we take those and the people in it? How can we take those practices, get them in the hands of farmers, get them adopted so they can have a huge impact?
Well, thanks for that, and thank you, Jim, for coming on. It's a really ambitious target to go to net zero emissions by 2040. I'm going to joke I'll have you back on in 2040 to see how you're doing, but I should say it is also admirable, as you mentioned earlier, Pepsi updating regularly on its progress. It's something you do see with companies making like sort of far off target commitments, but not giving transparency as to how far along they are in between. Can give some cover to these sustainability initiatives. So I appreciate that transparency, and maybe we can have you on sooner than 20 years from now to talk about how it's been going.
Great. Well, we'll have our newest sustainability report out mid-year. So that again will be another point where we report across the whole suite of measures. But again, to us, it's ultimately about how do we become more ambitious? How do we take bold action? And how do we engage our entire system, our employees, but then also all of the other people we touch, to do stuff that's really important for the planet and for the people in it. So thanks a lot for having me on, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your viewers and listeners.
Yeah, of course, it's important work. Appreciate it, Jim.
Great. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks. That's all for this week's episode of Make Business Better. We're going to be back right here next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. My guest then will be Scott Belsky. He's the Chief Product Officer for Adobe. We'll be talking about his book about the messy middle, that period of startups when you haven't quite figured it out and are still seeking product market fit, but need to keep the trains running on time and employees engaged, and all the challenges that come with those messy middle periods. We'll talk to Scott about that next week. Thank you for joining today's conversation, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.